I'm Deborah Sword.
Hi, I'm Tyson Bankert. Um, Deborah, I'm going to ask a couple of questions out of you. You are someone who I think is able to have deep empathy. But I am curious to kind of ask and also maybe challenge you a little bit on sort of the various natures in which we can come to understand and build our skills around empathy. We are always going to find people who have different points of view and opinions, some of who might be make us feel like we really have you know, uh, active allyship with, and the stories and the identities that they hold are very similar to ours. But then we also might find that we are in active opposition with people, people's stories that feel really distant and maybe fearful from our own. And um, oftentimes that can be where conflict happens, right? Or where conflict doesn't happen, where we avoid it. And so empathy mapping is something I wanted to kind of introduce to us is really about it's trying to obviously get us out of that thinking binary that binary that we've talked about before that really keeps conflict kind of engaged ultimately. And so for me, I think about empathy mapping as thinking, doing, hearing, feeling, saying, and seeing. So when we're in conflict with someone, oftentimes the holistic view of that entire conflict is by really thinking and reflecting about what exactly is that person that I'm in opposition with or that I'm in conflict with thinking? What are they doing? What are they hearing, feeling, saying, and seeing? And I have found in my experience that oftentimes I really reflect on what are they saying to me? What are the words that they're saying to me that I can then increase my empathy? Um, Sometimes it's also seeing, whether it's body language or the I feel statements. But oftentimes the doing, I find in my experience really hard because the doing doesn't always match up with what they're saying or what they say that they're feeling. And so when we think about empathy mapping holistically, we have to kind of consider all of these various ways in which to help us understand the other person. Um, and so I'm wondering for you, what are maybe some areas that you have found difficult, or which ones do you find a little bit easier to work with when you're trying to map out and understand someone from an empathetic point of view?
I mean, wow. So when I'm trying to listen compassionately, what
Mm,
I try to do is understand which conversation the person is having. Are they talking about what they think, their emotional state, their identity, their values, or their uncertainty? So those are four conversations
mm,
that you can pinpoint. Are they speaking past, future, or present? You can
mm,
hear that in the language. So to me, empathy in this case, some of it is in conversation analysis. I'm listening for which of the conversations they're having, the thinking, the emotional, the identity, or the uncertainty. So, thinking, they'll say, I think this. The facts are these. You don't understand what's really going on,
mm,
right? Because this is what's so it's more fact based, they're information seeking. The uh, emotional conversation will have words like I feel, or they'll use emotional words. The identity conversation is I am. I am this. I
mm,
come from this. They're talking about their location, their values, what's important to them that goes to who they are and how they see themselves. And then the uncertainty conversation, which is, I don't know. I, I'm afraid of making the wrong decision. I can't decide. What if I'm wrong? If I decide and it doesn't turn out well, what will happen? They're all different. And
Hmm.
so I have to come to them with my empathy for where they are.
Wow, that's some powerful stuff. I think
But
that
I'm
is
not sure
so.
it answers your question.
I think it does actually. I think it's really important when we want to understand and explore someone and understand who they are and where they're coming from. It's really important to be able to ask the right questions and also listen intently with how in which they are conveying, whether it's conflict or who they are, our situation, through that different analysis of thinking, or sorry, of is it a thinking conversation, an emotional conversation, a conversation around, their uncertainty, and being able to really decipher that. Because I think so part of that is then being able to then say, oh, how does the seeing, hearing, saying, feeling, thinking, and doing relates to those four different areas that you type of conversations that you are just talking about.
So that's so if we were to look at how to integrate the
Hmm.
empathy mapping, that that's a really good point. So if first step, we could identify which of the four conversations they're having. The statement they just made, was it emotional, thoughtful, analytical, logical? Was it about their identity and their values, or was it uncertainty and fear of consequences if they decide wrong, fear of being wrong, or concern about being wrong? And then I would ask them, I would say, the statement you just made seems to highlight your identity, or it seems to be about your location in the world.
Hmm.
You see yourself located in the world. Do I have that right? And then go into the empathy mapping. So, how would that work for you, Tyson? Let's say we've identified that somebody has just made a statement about how they see themselves fitting in the world and their values, which I would identify as an identity statement.
Right.
So, how
Yeah.
would you map that on your empathy map?
Yeah. I might say, one is, oh, like, how does that show up for you? Like, what would I have seen maybe in the past that would match with that identity indicator? It also might say like, oh, I would also, I think, really validate like, oh, I feel that also from you, or I know that that's really important, to you. I think also about, oh, that makes sense based on what I know about you and what you do, your practice, who you are, how you show up in the world. So I think it might start from that validating type of conversation to really say, yeah, like you can trust me in this conversation because I understand you. So that might be how I would start to sort of um, understand a little bit more about what the issue or problem might be. And sometimes it's just a space where people can actually just be sharing a little bit about who they are, which is also just really important.
I noticed in two of the statements you said one was a thinking response and
Yeah.
response, and one was an uncertain response. So your response to their statement, as well as identifying which of the conversations they were having, you had a choice of responding to them from a similar conversation or a different one. So they made an identity-based statement, and you can respond with a similar identity-based statement where you said, yes, same thing has happened to me. I can relate to that. Or, yeah, I think I see how you show up in the world, which is thinking. So, they fit together really well. If you identify, if you can confirm with them which of the four conversations they're having, you can meet them with empathy with uh, one of the conversations of your own. But I would check with them first, make sure that I'm getting it right.
Mhm.
But you said one other thing that was interesting. You said one of the things you have trouble with was the doing. Can you say more about that?
I feel like I can empathize with people when I can understand them when they are sharing with me how they feel, when they are saying the things that line up with their behavior, when I'm seeing and hearing tone and these things that indicate to me that I can then latch on to and be more empathetic with them. However, the doing piece, which I find kind of difficult because oftentimes what one does isn't always representative of how they feel or what they say. And so their actions don't always line up with everything else. And so if I'm just relying on the doing, like just on how people's behaviors are, um, that oftentimes can make it really hard for me to empathize with them without some of those other key indicators on the mapping. And so I have found that if I only relying on them on their doing, it is a pretty shallow understanding of how they show up in the world. And so, or what the problem is. Or, oftentimes when I understand that they're operating because of they're insecure or trauma or a type of emotion, I can go, now I see, and I can then empathize a bit better. And so I can't just, it's hard for me to just rely on one's single behavior to empathize with them. But that's just my own bias as well.
And that sounds like it would be a good opportunity to use your good questioning skills.
Right, exactly.
Tyson, thank you so much for raising empathy mapping. And I look forward to having more opportunity to use it in my own practice, my own life, and talking with you about it some more.
Well, you're welcome. I learned so much also from you as always, and really reflecting on the different types of conversations that I'm having with folks as well.
So thank you for listening. We hope you'll subscribe to Conflict Owners Manual. Join us again. And please subscribe, like, share, leave comments, and we'll see you again soon.